Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of First Canada Live. We are back. Good morning, good afternoon, and today we've got a really exciting show. I'd first like to welcome my co-host for today from the First Canada Youth Council. We got Aidan from Team 610. How's it going, man?
Good yourself?
Hi, it's pretty good. I'm really excited about the lineup we've got today. There's a lot of exciting stuff. So, Aidan, you've been a co-host on the show. You've done a segment on the show. You've been around. You did the logo for the show. You've been like very involved in First Canada Live. What's been your favorite segment so far?
I have to say, I think getting to see all the robots has been my favorite segment. So, like, getting to present with my team was probably, I'm a bit biased, but I would probably say was my favorite segment. But then also watching 2056's reveal, 1114's reveal, 5406's reveal. I just think it's very interesting to see how all the different teams operate and see like where we differ and all like where we're all very similar. So,
Yeah, one thing that I've really loved about the show is that like I get it, we don't have events, and it's obviously cooler to see the robots on the field, but like I never have a chance to talk to a team for 25 minutes at an event and like learn every nitty gritty thing about their robot. And so we've done that with like over 20 teams here across Ontario and Canada. We have the BC FTC team, so that's been really fun to take a look at. I see here you're back in online classes today. You had class today. How's school going?
it's going good. It's getting a bit overwhelming again, but it's manageable.
So your school was one of the first schools to go in fully into online classes. Do you have any advice for the other students on the show who are watching who are going to be transitioning to online classes over the next few weeks?
I definitely would say just make sure to get your work done just because it's due in a little bit. Things are going to start to pile up because online classes run a little bit different as I have now learned. But so mainly just like keep on top of things. Like you do have a lot of free time, but that's a lot of work time. Means you have a lot of other time you can do to get your work done. So
For sure. That's definitely some good advice in general. Always just keep on top of things. So, Aidan, today's show, we've got some good stuff here. We got a story time with someone I actually went to elementary school with. This is how long I've known this person. He's an alum of Team 188, former mentor of Team 610, current mentor of Team 1310, doing some really cool stuff in the world right now. We got Mr. Shawn Lim. We've got another storytime segment with Team 772 mentor and regular First Canada volunteer, Jaeleen Koscielski. And a really interesting team showcase. They're changing up the format a little bit. So we got Team 4039 MakeShift. Hey, Aidan, you know them pretty well from Durham this year, right?
yep,
Yeah,
recognize some drive team members.
exactly. Aidan and 610 played with 4039 at Durham and got all the way to the semis. First, I think are definitely the most exciting matches that have happened in Ontario this season. We only had 3 events, but those were that was a great semifinal segment. And our first segment is going to be a really fun one. It's engaging newcomers with First Canada staff member Arti Javeri and Youth Council member Param. So that's going to be a lot of fun. If you have questions for any of our guests, you have questions for Aidan, myself, or anyone, anything you want to chat about, make sure you dump them into the Twitch chat so we can get right on them and take a look at them right there. And also, if you're asking questions, you're interacting with all of us. Remember, First Canada Live is meant to be a positive and energetic show that celebrates the goodness of the First community. So remember your GP and your positivity when you're answering questions or asking questions or answering them too. So let's get ready with our next segment. This is a really fun one because I think we're changing it up a little bit. We're doing things a little bit differently. We have First Canada Director of Operations, Woody Flowers Finalist Award winner, and one of the producers who's been behind the scenes for every single episode of First Canada Live. We have Arti Javeri, and we're welcoming back Youth Council member for World Championship Dean's List winner Param from Team 4946. Hey everyone.
Hello.
Arti, I'm really excited to have you on the show. You've been behind the scenes for every single episode. Now we're putting the spotlight on you. So
That's right.
please share with us, Arti.
Right. Thank you. And I think I'll let Param introduce himself later, but I think many people might be wondering why newcomers and why are we talking about newcomers. But maybe let's do introductions with Param and then we'll go on. I think Param, people probably already know you. You're quite famous, but let's do a short introduction. Yes, he's a celebrity already.
Oh, well, okay, I guess I'll introduce myself for those who don't know me or to our international friends, over the border, all around the world. We have everyone watching First Canada Live, but I'm Param. I'm on Team 4946, and I was a championship Dean's List Award winner, and I specialize in awards and design and business on my team.
And as you go through the segment, you'll hear a lot more from Param on what all he does. But so one might ask why newcomers, I guess, and I think why we talking about newcomers today, and why do we want to engage with newcomers, and how is it connected with FIRST Robotics? So I think we're constantly at FIRST trying to make strides in equipping all kinds of kids to have the skills and the expertise that they need to be employed in the future. So I think that's one of our major goals, is to be able to give all these skills to these kids that are coming onto our program. And we see a lot of that right now with what's going on with COVID-19. You've seen a lot of teams, a lot of schools, a lot of mentors, a lot of alumni that have stepped up and are doing these wonderful things and building up, headgears to visors. And I think you'll have one of them actually speak about it later, that Karthik mentioned, so you'll hear from him directly, but on how they're helping all the doctors in the hospitals today. And I think that's the next, that kind of talks a lot about what FIRST does to kids and what we can do for the world for tomorrow. So as we're constantly, kind of finding ways to equip kids with all of the information that they need to be prepared for the future, and knowing that Canada is primarily an immigrant country, newcomers is something that I think all of us, tend to meet, greet, stay with, around, be in school with all the time. And that's why FIRST kind of fits into the picture right there, just because with kids being in school today, newcomers are have been around, in schools, and have been part of our society, who are coming in constantly. So I think the big piece around why we're talking about newcomers and why is it important to engage with newcomers is just to make sure that we include them. Just when we talk about inclusivity and all of that, we make sure that we include them, not just in our schools and our societies, but see how they kind of can become part of our FIRST culture and learn more about FIRST culture through that experience, right? So,
right. And Arti, you touched on a really good point that's important, because we need the newcomers in our community, but they also need FIRST, because speaking, I'll talk a lot about my mother's experiences coming to the United States and coming to Canada. It's such a difficult adjustment when you're a young person. You're in your 20s, you're bringing your family over, you're moving to a country where you think you know the language because you learned it in school, but you come and everything's a shock, everything's a culture shock. And one of the things that I love about our FIRST community is that family-like aspect, and how we take people in and we show them what's going on when it comes to like just a rookie grade 9 member. But imagine doing that for someone who's new to the country and making them feel welcome. It just eases that transition point, because it's so easy when you're new to a country to feel alone, and FIRST can really help with that.
That's absolutely true. And I think Param has something to say about that, because he kind of came in kind of like that, in that kind of culture where his parents were new and I was new as a parent. I mean, I came with my son here, who many of you may know him on the call, but I came in with him. So I came in with Josh actually when he was 3 years old, and kind of learned a lot of new things, around. I was in my 20s, learned a lot of new stuff that I didn't know about. And I still remember one particular incident, which kind of embarrasses me till date when I think about it. But I was working in a company. I was just 3 months in the country, and I was working in a company, and I came from Dubai. So we learned the curriculum that we studied was more of the British English. So we kind of use a lot of British words. And so I was going towards the elevator, and I said, and I was talking to a client, and my manager was with me, and I said lift instead of an elevator, right? And I got told back so badly after that. I was actually called into the room and said, you cannot be using the word lift. Do you know what that means? And I was a bit like, okay, it was just it was a language that I had learned differently, and I was surprised at that attitude. But I left that company very shortly, actually, after that. But those are the things that sometimes, some smallest of things like that can impact, I guess, understanding on how you can be more empathetic, or you can kind of, at that point, now when I think back, that person could have been an ally and showed me the way, rather than kind of done something differently in how she behaved. But things like that kind of bring you back to where you can now look at other newcomers coming into society and seeing how you can kind of be an ally for them. And I know Param wants to talk a little bit more, and I should maybe ask Param that question, because I know he has an experience to talk about in a very similar manner about his parents coming to Canada.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just share my story and talk about the importance of how being cognizant of newcomers and recognizing that they have different challenges can really impact people's lives for the better. So I came here, like I was born here, but my parents moved here the year I was born. So everything is a huge culture shock. They're out here, trying to make a living, try to be successful in the new country. And I feel like that's one of the biggest goals for any parent that's coming to Canada or any other country, that they want to provide a better future for their children. They want to give them a better education. They want to do things that are best for their children, something that's going to make them thrive. And sometimes it makes you feel like you're on First Canada Live, because you have so many producers behind the scenes trying to make things work. And then you're out here just on the Twitch stream, just looking at the final product. But sometimes it's easy to miss out on all the hard work and effort that goes into making that Twitch stream. And I feel like that was very much my experience, because when I was a young child, my parents worked super duper hard to give me all the opportunities that they could. Like every single week, they took me to the Mississauga Public Library and the Mississauga Central Library. And I would always, read, try to figure out new things, learn as much as I can. And, that's the greatest resource I can get. It's a library, it's free, education is open for everyone.
Param, I want to interrupt you for a second, because I think a lot of people who aren't from immigrant families don't truly understand this. Because I remember when I was 4 years old, the same sort of thing. My parents take me to the library my mom and I would go to the library every day of the summer, and she would work on her English and I would just read, anything I could, because we couldn't, and this is like very, it's hard to talk about, but we couldn't afford to go to paid summer camps, and we couldn't afford to do those more expensive private lessons or whatever. But libraries were free, and to immigrant families who don't have, who are coming, because there's a wide range of immigrant families too. Let's not try and paint everything with the same brush strokes. Strums come and they're ready and whatever. But for our family, where my father was just, just finished his PhD and they're, kind of struggling their way through things, the library was everything for us. And for me as a kid, we couldn't buy books. That just wasn't a thing that was going to happen. So yes, you sign out as many things as you could. And I remember one of the librarians gave me a pack of crayons. It was just the biggest sort of thing. And so these programs, the library is a panacea for immigrant families. And so I know what you're going to be talking about next, but it's just so important for people to realize, why is the library a big deal? Because so many people just, and I am guilty of this now. I rarely ever go to the library. I just buy books, and because I have that privilege and that ability to do so now. But as a young person, the library was everything for me growing up.
Yeah, and I definitely have a very similar experience to that, because I would walk home every single day balancing a stack of books that was 20 books high, and I would get through that the entire week and then go back thirsty for more. And I feel like it was totally being in the right place at the right time and being aware of the library's resources that really helped me take it to the next level. Because one time I just happened to be at the library, I see a poster on the wall, I see people doing this cool new thing. Oh, what is this? I tell my parents, what's this going on in the side room over there? Oh, turns out it's 1241 over there with their cool community FLL team. That little tiny me, which Arti knows about, which I was actually really tiny. But I was, asking my parents, hey, could I get involved in this FLL program? And for my parents, it was, yes, definitely. I want to give my child the best educational opportunity possible. And they let me do FLL. They were like, hey, this could be really good for getting my kid into STEM. And the first meeting I went, completely hooked. Absolutely from that day, I was 100% a first kid. And what happened after that was I continued through, doing the FLL for a couple years. And then that experience really kickstarted my first journey. And then I ended up going to Humberview Secondary School, and I joined my FRC team, and using the skills that FLL taught me, and something that I would have never imagined before. I remember going to Crescent's field and seeing the robot perform. I was like, hey, me as a little kid me as a tiny little kid was thinking, right now I'm building Lego robots, but one day I can do this too. And that was so impactful for me. And then I ended up joining my FRC team because I was inspired by that initial spark. And then it's got me all the way to where I am today, where I've started, outreach programs on my team, doing engineering logs, starting the awards, making a community impact, reaching out to sponsors. And I really think that FRC comes full circle when you're able to give back to the community that gave to you and made you who you are.
Yeah, and I think what Param said here is quite important when he talked about his parents being able to bring him there. I think we've had so many workshops when I was on the team at that point. We've had so many workshops in educating parents on what kind of skills we are kind of, trying to give these kids to be able to be ready for the future and educate them on, I mean, Param's parents were new to the country, and we've done a lot of that with other different organizations here as well in Mississauga. But it kind of, as much as you have to teach the kids, I think it's also about educating the adults and the parents to be able to be comfortable with the program and to be able to, kind of be able to understand what skills their kids are going to achieve at the end of the day. So I know we did we actually went, and this is again through sponsorships and through our connections through our sponsors. When I was on Team 1241, we actually went to the Polycultural Immigration Center and started workshops for new immigrant children there, and it was unbelievable to see the feedback and the response we got from children. They knew very little English. We had to take settlement workers in to be able to kind of guide them through the language and have our student pair up with another settlement worker to be able to get the language barrier across. But in doing all that, and today, I mean, I'm so happy to say that those kids are now doing FLL Junior on the teams, and they've got programs there, and they're still running it independently. So I think just to see the shift of how even we as FRC can impact not just the students, but the parents of the students, and where we can go further with it is quite remarkable.
Yeah, the impact on the adults can't be overstated, because honestly, it's harder for the adults to adjust than it is for the kids. Because like Param, like you said you were born here, you came right when?
Yeah, I was born here.
Yeah, and Josh came over when he was 3 years old. I was born in the US. So for me, my adjustment, because like kids are kids, as soon as you start school, you play with each other or whatever. But I know for like my mom, the adjustment for her is that she's left all her brothers and sisters, her parents, all her friends, everything that she knew. And so everything is totally new. But like the program, obviously there weren't first library programs when I was that age or whatever, but the library programs that did exist helped her adjust. And it's such a really neat thing that FRC can not only impact the students, but to impact the parents, and can really make things, kind of be life altering. So
look at me. I was not with FRC before, and I'm with FRC today as a parent. Yeah. I started the program as a parent and kind of joined because Josh was in the program, and he started in grade 9, and I kind of looked at the program, and there've been a lot of mentors and a lot of people that have actually influenced that pathway, right? Like for an adult like me who kind of joined, the program or got to the program as a student as a parent, and then kind of moved into mentorship, like taking my business knowledge that I have from Hewlett Packard, bringing it to the school and bringing it as a mentor. So I think overall, I think if you look at the whole picture, I think FRC not only impacts like students, and it can also impact adults, and especially in the newcomer scene. I think it plays a very big part, because as it is, the children are kind of new to school, to clubs, to everything that they can get to. And then now you've got the parents who are also figuring out, is this the right thing I'm putting my child into? And having the parent involvement and the comfort level for other parents to kind of talk to them and mentor them, or become their allies to bring them on board, I think helps a lot in terms of engaging them, to keep them engaged in all of these activities and build confidence, leadership, and all of those other skills that probably, as much as the student is getting it, the adult is getting it too, right? So
a question I have for the both of you is, we've talked a lot about these community type programs. Every year there's hundreds of thousands of new immigrants who come to Ontario, and they settle all across. It's not just in Toronto, but all over the place. And they're going to schools where there are FRC teams. How can FRC students and FRC mentors effectively recruit new immigrants to their teams, and how can they make them comfortable and enable them to succeed on their teams?
I think that this question can be very easily solved under the umbrella of visibility. I think it's really important that your FRC team tries to make an impact on not only just your team, but also your school, and eventually your community. And I think it's really important that if you get your team's name out there and you get your team's mission statement and message out there and you're spreading GP and everything that you do, then it'll be so much easier to, get the message out. Like if you are at a club fair, for example, like I know lots of teams do little club fairs where they have all the clubs, arranged in the gymnasium and you like demo your robot, whatever. Well, I think it's really important to not just, participate as heavily as you can in those events and try to get your name out there to the students who are, newly coming to your school, because they may not know about if your program even existing, but also advertising the aspects that are maybe not so well known, like really emphasizing the fact that this is the first family, this is the first community, and this is something bigger that you can get a part of. And maybe like try to encapsulate that, experience that you get at a competition. It's undescribable, but if you can just get somebody hooked on that little piece of first, then it can absolutely change the trajectory of their entire life. So I think that definitely increasing the visibility of your team and spreading that message as far as you can is incredibly important. I don't know, Arti, you can probably add on to this, definitely.
Yeah, and we did that a little bit on the team, and I was there, and it kind of started in those early days, and I know what we did is we did a lot of obviously advertising in the school and in your community is what Param just said is number one. You have to be able to in the open houses, in the any kind of shows that go on at school, I think you have to be visible. The robotics team has to be visible there. We also did what we call the peer-to-peer mentoring program. So if a new immigrant, we knew from the school, we worked with the school actually to be able to understand who were newcomers to the school, and we kind of paired them up. If they were coming to robotics, we kind of paired them up with some of our students at that point, so that there was always a partnership or some kind of like a buddy system almost, where they felt comfortable to talk to this person, and we were able to understand more about the program. What we did something uniquely was we held a lot of parent meetings. Like that was huge, just because the students may be as engaged as much as they want to, but if the parents don't understand the program, it was very hard to bring them on board or to be able to send their kids out to the program. So we held a lot of parent sessions, and we also actually had handbooks in different languages to be able to explain what robotics was to them, so that especially when we knew there was one point when we had this was I think in the 2014 or 16 timeframe, where we had a lot of Syrian refugees that came into Canada, and we had an influx of those students in the school, and so we decided to build handbooks in I think we did in Arabic and Mandarin. And because we saw there was a lot of population that needed that language, we had the language barrier, so we kind of had the handbooks in Arabic and Mandarin, and we were able to communicate that effectively to parents about the program, so they felt a little comfort level to be able to then work through that through the robotics teams. So it kind of built a little bit of cultural gap. It kind of bridged that. It kind of helped us in bringing more students and more parents comfortable with FIRST, and in kind of understanding that transit, like it kind of, I would say, helped the transition for those newcomers from not just with FIRST, but through the school system, because they were more comfortable now in talking to teachers, to parents, and to other people around the school. So, and the skill set that comes along with that for kids, right? So.
The one piece of advice that I would give to teams out there is, it's easy to say, but you need to make sure that your team is an inclusive environment, and
Yes.
it's just little things, because when you're new to the country, everything's kind of scary and everything's new and everything's nervous. So just doing little things to make things comfortable. How you choose your meals, make sure your meals are considerate of diets, make sure that you have vegetarian options, so they don't have to feel like they have to always ask and remember, hey, I need a halal meal, or I need whatever. Always be mindful of that, so they don't have to always be the one that's asking and nagging, because at a certain point you feel like you're inconveniencing everyone, and that's the last thing you want to do as a newcomer, because newcomers to Canada are almost all with this mentality of, I'm just so thankful to be here. I don't want to mess things up. I don't want to upset people. I don't want to ask for too much. So I've seen plenty of kids on teams who they won't say anything, and then they'll just try and eat a couple of pieces of lettuce or something and be like, oh no, I'm not hungry, it's totally fine. But you have to be accommodated. That's just one way. I want to make sure we bring Aidan in on this discussion, because he's been here. And Aidan, as an ally and as someone who has many friends of all different backgrounds and all that sort of stuff, what do you think about the whole discussion, and what have you learned here?
I'd say I thought it was a really interesting discussion, and I think the part that connected most with me was the idea of like the first family and joining in when you're such a young age. I personally joined when I was in grade 10, and I found like I was instantly a part of like something that I was always like sort of missing in my life. I met so many people like me, so many people who were interested in STEM and had the same sort of passion. And it's something that I've truly like, it's what I spend most of my time on. It's like what I'm excited, like it's the friends I'm excited to see when like everything's over, and like after your competitions, when you win, when you lose. And I think like the idea of the first family is something that really connects with everybody, like not just newcomers, but people who are allies or people who are involved as mentors or students. And I think even joining like I think going in doing FLL Junior is like an amazing thing, and it brings students in like at such a young age. But even if you join even later, it's a community and a family that will last for as long as you're involved with it.
And you touched on something really important there, Aidan, because you said I met up people like me. And when you're new to the country, it feels like no one is like you. But when you join a first team, you have something in common. Sure, you know, like everything else might feel different, but you love robots, you love solving problems, you love STEM, you love dancing the Cotton Eye Joe, you know, like this is suddenly you feel a part of this society and you fit in and you belong. And that's really what a lot of this is about. We are running down on time, but we got some good questions in chat that I'd love to pose to Arti and Param. What advice would you have for parents who come from a very academic focused background and getting them adjusted to their kids dedicating so much time to activities that don't directly impact their grades, like a first team?
This is a fantastic question, and something that I personally had to, go through, because my parents were also very academically focused. Grades are first and foremost always. And usually it's like that for, I don't want to generalize, but for many newcomers, it's like that, where they always prioritize their kids' grades. But again, something to understand about the university system here is that it's not always the same, or the college system here, it's not always the same. They also value these soft skills and all these extracurricular activities that you're doing. And FIRST gives you skills that you can't really write down on a report card. The leadership, the public speaking, all these different, like this entire plethora of things comes from, actually solving the problems hands-on. And also you get these incredible FIRST scholarships that can help you, to whatever you're doing in the future. And there's so many additional benefits that you get out of FIRST that are just not tangible in that same way. And even then, like even in the marks department, like you have this entire support structure of an entire team supporting you academically. Like if you want to, solve that physics problem, you have 50 members on a team that you can turn to. So it's an incredibly supportive environment that I think that parents should try to understand, or maybe like, bring them to a meeting or something so they can really get a grasp of the culture. And once they realize that you're solving these problems, or once they see your robot shooting those power cells into the port at the competition, they'll get it. They'll understand that FIRST is more than robots. So that was the tagline.
I'm going to add to that, and Shawn and I might talk about this a little bit in the next segment, but I have seen some of the most brilliant immigrant kids when I was in high school at Woburn Collegiate. They were new to the country with the highest marks, the highest, like we're talking 99s, hundreds, and when they got to university and they went into the job market, they struggled. And people with marks way lower than them, and I'll just be blunt, people way dumber than them were getting the better jobs, the higher paying jobs and whatever. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I'm not going to, we could do a whole show on systemic biases and all that sort of stuff. But one thing is the people who are better at talking with people and have better personal communication skills, which are really hard to learn as an immigrant, get these jobs. And one way you can really learn those skills is by being on a FIRST team. And this isn't like some marketing talk. This isn't me just trying to sell this because I'm wearing this shirt. This is real. Arti?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And what Param had was absolutely right too, right? I think as a parent to another parent, I would say you can teach your kid all you want by sending him to a manufacturing course or a coding course or a mechanical course. But if you want to build a character of a child, FIRST is for you, right? Like you're actually giving them leadership, communications, presentation, marketing, mechanical, like almost everything that you want to see in your child, and be independent and be able to market themselves. They're working with sponsors day in, day out. This is the best place to be after they finish high school and get into university, like you just said, Karthik. So definitely, like it's, I mean, I can easily, I think, can convince a parent that this is the best place for a student to be able to get all of those skills without, without being so hard on them. It becomes a passion, right? It becomes something that that's just inbuilt into them.
All right, thank you so much. We could go on about this, and maybe I think there's some true value in possibly doing a later show at some point on more of these topics with the roundtable, because I thought this was amazing. Thank you, Arti and Param, for sharing your stories, and thank you for everything you've been doing for First Canada Live and everything like that.
Thank you.
Before we get to our next segment, let's take a look at this video from one of our event hosts with Master University.
So today, right now at McMaster, we're doing robotics for First Canada, and we're team 6865. We're competing around with our robot, and during that, we are going through qualifications with other teams. It's an alliance, and then hopefully near the end of our competitions, we'll be picked in a team, and we'll be able to do elimination matches and keep going with that.
My experience started when I was in grade 9. So one of my friends actually pushed me to join the team, and the first thing I saw when I walked in was how accepting people were. And I was shown what it meant to go through engineering processes and to do CAD and wiring and how to work on your team as a business, how to present. So I was just hooked from the start, and I had to go by the whole principle you get out of it, which you put into it. And now being first alum, I hope to go back and mentor while I'm in university.
And we're back. Time for another segment. Great to hear from McMaster University. And now I'd like to welcome our next guest. This is going to be a really fun one. He is a Team 188 alum from the original team back in the day, back in 1998, a former mentor of Team 610, current mentor of Team 1310, the first ever First Canada alum to win a first scholarship back in 1999 to what was then called GMI, which is now called Kettering University, and a Woody Flowers Finalist Award winner, Shawn Lim. Hey, buddy.
How's it going, Karthik? Great to be on the show.
I'm glad to have you on the show because normally in these segments, I'm the one talking about the old days or whatever, and now I have someone else who can do that with me, so I don't have to feel as ancient. So I kind of gave an overview, like a little bit of your first journey, but Shawn, can you tell us about your first journey, where it started, where it's taken you, and where you are now?
Sure, and I just want to link back to the last segment because my journey starts obviously with my parents, who are also immigrants to the country. My dad came to Canada with 20 bucks in his pocket, but with the prospects of an education. He eventually did his PhD out at UBC in quantum physics, ended up working for Ontario Power Generation, and was heavily involved in bringing up all the nuclear reactors here in the country. But every one of those immigration stories that you had just told, literally, I've got one through my upbringing and my experience through FIRST. But I started doing robotics in grade 10, largely because I was actually more interested in playing sports, but I joined the basketball team at Woburn many, many years ago. I don't know if you actually knew this, but
I did not know this.
Grade 10, I actually made the team, and I was on the team for a total of 3 days. On the second day of practice, being sort of the shortest Asian guy on the team, it's kind of a sad story, but from my own teammates, I had a bunch of racial slurs thrown my way, and it was crushing. It was absolutely crushing, and so I quit the team. Which, you know, seems like a sad story, but for everyone who sort of says, well, for every sad story, there's a rainbow at the end of, or a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It led me to robotics because I love sports, I love competition, and one of our mutual friends, I think it was Karen, sort of approached me, Karen Chang, and just said, hey, you love sports.
Who's an FRC judge now?
Right, and she said, well, she'd been on the team for a number of years before that. I said, hey, try this out, you might like it. So I joined, and I fell in love just at first sight. And sharing another story, my parents were not crazy about it. They wanted me not to spend any time outside of school other than studying, because they wanted me to get the 99s and the 100s, just like you were talking about. And every day it was kind of like, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time. Come home, study, get the grades. But then when my grade 12 OAC, I'm dating myself, came around, I have an older sister, 7 years older than me. She was fortunate enough to gain entrance into MIT, of all places. And when your family has an opportunity to send your firstborn child to MIT, you take it. I'm from, my family's not particularly wealthy. They made huge sacrifices. We're talking like second mortgage to send my sister off to university. When it was my time to start making my selections, they were upfront with me. They basically said that, hey, you've got to pay your own way. And so this was around the time where some universities started smartening up and saying, hey, we're looking for really smart students. all these universities are sending out scholarships for basketball players, football players, all the different sports. Is it so crazy if we offer a scholarship for robotics? Like, it's kind of turning into a competition, just like the other sports are. But this is our way to attract like amazing students into our program. And GMI, formerly General Motors Institute, now renamed to Kettering University, was literally one of the first. I'm not sure, they might have been the first university to really offer close to full ticket scholarships for students who were doing competitive robotics in high school. So I applied. They gave me the scholarship. They put me up at the school to do tours and everything. I got to meet all the faculty like on a first name basis before I even got there. And it ended up just being amazing. So I had my education paid for. It's also a co-op school. So I was working every 3 months and going to school every 3 months. So I actually made an income. So I made money through university. I saved up that money, and then I founded my own company, or with 2 other Team 188 alumni during that time. And then I sold that company about now 12 years ago, if you can believe that. Or I sold my stake in that company. The company's still operating. And then decided to become a teacher. I taught for a year in the TDSB. And then the Crescent School, the school that Aidan attends, Team 610 and 2013 World Champions for FRC. They essentially poached me from the TDSB. I taught there for a number of years. I worked for a year at FRC Robotics Canada, doing a lot of the work towards the district model. I taught for a year at St. Clements, and now I am full-time at Bot Camp, where we built a great program at the Crescent School, but the truth is not every student has the financial resources to go to a school like the Crescent School. So Bot Camp is kind of my way of taking as many aspects of that program and being to deliver it to the wider community. So that's kind of my story, Karthik.
Yeah, it's been a cool journey. It's been cool to be alongside you for such a long part of it and seeing all that's going on. I want to talk about something specifically that you've been working on recently, because, and I think this is a cool story for all our first students to hear about, because it's been a long time since you've worked in industry as a designer or anything like that. You've been in education, you've been doing all sorts of cool stuff, but you recently, I mean, we've all seen the current crisis going on with COVID-19, and we see that our healthcare workers are lacking equipment that they need to do their job. And you saw that there was a problem. And how did you decide to address that, Shawn?
So this goes back to my very first co-op job. I worked for a company called Becton Dickinson. They make huge volumes of sterile medical equipment. If you've ever had a blood test taken, those little vacuum tubes that they hook up. I worked in that factory. They pump out 2 million of them a year. Amazing opportunity as like a 19-year-old kind of still snot-nosed kid trying to get his feet wet. But a few weeks ago, a family friend of mine, Dr. Marcus Cargill at the Toronto East General Hospital, he approached me saying that, Shawn, our hospital is running low on face shields. He had heard that there's 3D printed versions out there that are available. And he basically just said, Shawn, tell me more about these. Is this something that we could actually do in our hospital? So I got on a call with him and I showed him all the existing models which were out there. And the truth is he asked some really hard questions about it. He said, like, how do we disinfect these? Can they be reused? How many of these can we make? The little foam bits on them, like, are they going to disintegrate? And I basically said, well, you know what? If those are your real concerns at the hospital, give me a day. Maybe I'll design something that works for you. So that night I designed just a little 3D printed part. It's just this white part here. But what it does is you actually hook up to it a page protector. So all of us are in school. We've used these. They're little clear plastic pouches. You slide sheets of paper into them and they've got 3 holes in them for a binder. But basically take the 3 holes, you clip them in to the front of this headband, this 3D printed headband, and you put on 2 elastic bands just like this. And it's a little hard to do with my headset on, but just like that, it's an instant visor. Toronto East General Hospital basically last week put out a call to the community for 3D printers to start printing these. They only take about 20 minutes to print. You can do multiple in one job. And then they're asking you to drop them off or to ship them to the hospital. They already have actually a much stronger clear plastic sheet that they're putting on at the hospital. So you don't have to supply those. But they've got an open call for 10,000 of these right now. They're still a few thousand short of that goal. And so any 3D printers out there who are looking for like a really real tangible way to help out, please consider doing this. If you go to botcamp.org, my organization's website, you'll see right at the top, there's a link to 3D printable STL files that you can download and make yourself. And even if you just have friends and family who are in healthcare or frontline pharmacies, whatever, you can print these up for them very quickly, put some face shields on, and you can give them just a little bit of extra protection when they're out there, you know, trying to save lives and help the people who need it.
All right, Aidan, what do you think of all this?
I have to say, like, as somebody who, like, I personally, like, I've seen your 3D printer and I've seen like how much work you do with 3D printing. I personally just think, yeah, that seems pretty familiar. Like, and I just think it's like really neat to see, because I personally, like, I'm a bit of a hobbyist when it comes to 3D printing, but just like learning, like, my main question was actually going to be for somebody who wants to get involved and actually like has a 3D printer and wants to like make a difference and start printing these, where would you go? And you actually answered my question. So if anybody missed that, go to the Bot Camp's website. But I just think it's really cool how like you've taken your experience as like somebody who's just like teaching students how to use, for example, like 3D printing, like, and taking your experience and building on that, and then like bringing it to the broader community to help the community in such a time like this.
So that's just one thing I want to emphasize. When you're building these awesome robots for whichever first program you're involved with, you're not building them just to build competitive robots. Like, you're building up those skills for times like this, where this is your time to shine. You know, it's great and all that you can do a 2-speed gearbox with like automatic shifting algorithms and everything, but that's not the reason why you're doing this. It's so that you can go and take those skills and do something actually helpful with them. So yeah, that would be, sorry, go ahead, Karthik.
No. What I thought was so cool about this is because like you have your design, Shawn, but like if you go on like Chief Delphi right now, there's so many different teams across the world who have various designs for visors, and it reminds me of going to the competition when you see there's one problem to be solved, but there's different robots that are solving it, and there's just so much going on, and just the ingenuity, because no one here has been trained to design PPE or to make visors. That's not something anyone ever took a course in, but it's the problem solving skills learned first. And it's like, I love that your design, Shawn, it's just like, it utilized the fact that resources are scarce. Like, where it's like, okay, what can I use to hook up to this? I'll use a sheet protector because I know you can probably get these in bulk right now. They haven't run out yet.
And if you're looking for them in bulk, there's a link to them on the website for Uline. Not that I'm going to plug them, but yeah, the crazy thing is that, you know, I could take my typical grade 11 or grade 12 student who's on an FRC team, and there's a good chance they've already got the skills to do what I just did. You go to the website, you look at the design, you know, like you go to a typical FRC competition, I'm willing to bet there's probably 100 kids who have the exact skills to have done this exact thing, which is absolutely amazing.
I saw a design today that the first official account tweeted today, and it was using a baseball hat, just like a normal baseball hat that it wears, and then you put like 3 clips on the hat, and then those clips then clip into the face shield. And it was just like, wow, that's like ingenious. And so I think what's so impressive is, Shawn, is that, you know, you're a mechanical engineer by trade or a mechatronics engineer by trade?
I'll tell you all about that. I started my university as a mechanical engineer and electrical engineer double major. And I switched after my second year. So just a story for all of you kids who are like really unsure about what you want to major in. Like, honestly, pick whatever you love right now. And if you change your mind 1 or 2 years down the road, doesn't matter. It's not the end of the world. But I'm ultimately now a computer engineer. Switched my second year to computer engineering and decided to try and overload and graduate early so I could get out into the workforce that much quicker. But yeah, I'm a computer engineer by trade, but having gone through all those experiences, even being on the FRC team, you know, I learned tons of CAD, I learned tons of design, and even as a mentor working with 610 and, you know, alongside guys that Aidan sees every day, or I guess sees virtually every day now, the ability to do all this. But even having said that, in terms of the education section, like again, that's one thing that we're trying to do here at Bot Camp is there's a lot of students out there who don't have access to FRC teams, although, you know, we're trying to get there one in every school. But even then, we're trying to do like online tutoring for these types of design skills. And we're actually leaning towards the younger group, like 10 to 14-year-olds who maybe are looking to get into FRC one day. But, you know, for all these skills, like, they're not as hard as they used to be in terms of learning. And even during a time like this, if you're thinking, hey, I would love to learn how you design those visors or anything of the sort, I'd love to learn how to do a little bit of 3D printing. There are resources and there are people who will teach you, just like what we're trying to do in our organization.
All right, Aidan, do we have any questions from chat right now?
I will just quickly check that. One of our youth council members actually asks, Namira, Michael Guerin is pretty close to 10,000 masks right now. What would you say are the next steps?
Well, the thing is that they need way more than 10,000 visors. 10,000 is their initial ask. They've already put them into rotation into their staff. And what they're going to do is they're going to do just a quick design review. This is stuff that you guys as FRC members are familiar with. You try something, you got to check and see whether it's dialed in or not. And if there's an opportunity to improve it, you do it. And so what's going to happen after those 10,000 is, well, they're going to ask for another 20,000 more. Okay. And then during that bridge period, if the design appears to be like pretty solid, we may move into injection molding them. So we've got a few people who we're talking to do this in much greater volumes. And, the opportunity is to see if we might be able to scale, because Michael Guerin is just one hospital. And if you look around, there aren't too many hospitals who are accepting 3D printed visors. And the reason is, and actually I'll allude it to you, Karthik, because I've heard of that baseball cap design that you were talking about. But the truth is like, okay, if you donate baseball caps in these clips, everything that comes into the hospital, you have to assume is contaminated with COVID-19. So you've got to disinfect it. So if you get a baseball cap with the clips, baseball cap is going to be really, really hard to disinfect because you got to assume that it's dirty. So this is why Michael Guerin actually went with this design. They said, okay, we're only going to ask for these tiny little white plastic, or not white, but just plastic, 3D printed parts. We're going to dump them into a big bath of hydrogen peroxide and disinfect those. We already have the sheets, which are new and known to be clean. We already have the elastics, which are new and known to be clean. We'll assemble those at the hospital so we can disinfect only what we need to, and we can push out like thousands of these if needed. And so that's the other part. There are actually like dozens of designs for different 3D printed visors, but it's that whole, what do we do with them once they come to the hospital? Has anyone thought about that yet?
So you're trying to minimize the size of what's coming in, and you're also trying to make sure that it can easily be disinfected, as opposed to, like, for example, this morning before we went on the show, I was starting to think about, like, okay, what would I do if I had to design this from scratch? And I was thinking, oh, I just get some 3M foam with the adhesive or whatever, but like trying to disinfect that in hydrochloride is gonna.
And that's what came to light during my first call with the doctors. And I showed them the existing designs. They were like, yeah, that piece of foam, we throw it into a bath of hydrogen peroxide. We've tried it and it kind of like melts. And we're like, oh, well, that's no good use to you. And then their next question was, okay, you're going to 3D print all these. Can I get 5 to 7 uses out of this? Because that's what's only going to make it viable. I can't have a one-time use visor. And they were kind of like, okay, we can disassemble this. We can put a new sheet on, and this will last through the hydrogen peroxide bath about 5 to 7 times. And it's small. We can make, and we even did the math, like you can make probably 3 or 4 of these for every one of a lot of the other designs, even though, it's not a really popular design on the internet right now. Everyone's talking about, all these fancier ones made by big name people, celebrities in the 3D printing community. But yeah, there's all these things behind the scenes that go into something like this. And the truth is that as people who've done first robotics, we can see these things easier. Like it took me about 5 seconds to explain that whole process to you, and you're just like, boom, I get it. But there's a lot of people trying to get 3D printed visors into hospitals, but they're not really understanding that side of it. And so that's kind of why we need these skills, regardless of what you choose to go into. Because even if you're a healthcare person and you're on the other side of this, you're going to see right away, like, this makes sense, actually, even though it doesn't look like much. And on the paper, it looks maybe like the worst 3D printed visor design out there. But in reality, it might actually be the easiest one to put onto our staff.
Also, you said you're thinking about, Michael Guerin's thinking about tooling up and injection molding that. Looking at that design right away, and this is like from my, other experience, is that you could probably, instead of tooling that up as one injected molded piece, is to do a symmetrical design with 3 pieces that'll snap together, and then your tooling cost becomes much lower, and then you can injection mold a whole bunch more, especially because when it comes to tooling, you want to be able to each separate tool that you create is a huge cost. So if you can just use the same tool and just do higher volume and snap it all together, and these are the things you learn about in first. Like, these are things that like most hobbyists aren't going to be aware of. And
Yeah.
obviously, I've worked in industry, so I've seen the side, and I'm very familiar on the financial side of tooling costs and how devastating they can be. But
behind the scenes, all these things that you just talked about, those are actually behind the scenes the hardest challenges for people to overcome, because people just don't have that background and skills. And so the more people who have them, regardless of what you go into, so all you firsters who are doing first and learning all this stuff, and maybe you choose to become doctors in the future or business people, like this is where that background and that experience really, really, really helps, because you are not afraid of something like this at this point. You see the solution to bring it into your hospital, and you can kind of filter out all the noise.
Yeah. And I think what also is really cool about this is throughout the entire run of First Canada Live, we've talked a lot about First LEGO League, and we've had so many First LEGO League alums or whatever. This is the type of thing they do in First LEGO League with the research project, where they have to come up with a solution. Like this is the exact kind of things that they do. And it's just like, yeah, it's really impressive.
Sorry. So Karthik, I know we want to get to some questions, but just very quickly, I just did want to mention to everyone. So if you are interested in learning these skills, Bot Camp, we have a lab, but it's shut down because of COVID-19. But we have switched over to be able to do online one-on-one tutoring. So again, if there's anyone out there, I know our FRC teams aren't running right now, but if you're looking for an opportunity to maybe learn some of these skills, please check us out.
Absolutely, Shawn. And I want to kind of get to a little bit of the story time stuff now. We talked a lot about the PPE, and we could talk about a lot about this. We could do a design review on the injection molds. You and I could come up with a plan right now, just like old times, you know, we just go back and forth and throw stuff together. Aidan can jump in on it too. But we have an opportunity here today because you've been doing first as long as anyone else has in Canada. There's 4 of us now who've been there since the very beginning. I would love to hear some of your favorite stories. First stories from the 90s.
From the 90s? You're going to qualify that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. This one involves you, all right? Because
hey, how about we talk about something? How about the
no. Don't worry. I won't go there. But this is a nice one. It's a cute one actually, because we were both on the yearbook committee as well. And for those of you in first, like who are just like, oh, we're not just all, you know, super hardcore STEM nerds. There's a huge gamut of people who are involved with first. People who are artsy, people who are like, it's all over the place. But Karthik and I were heavily involved with the yearbook. But we took advantage kind of the yearbook facilities. They had a beautiful office just for us. And I remember on at least more than one occasion when we had crazy deadlines for the FRC team, we would somehow make our way into that yearbook office at odd hours of the night at the end of the FRC meeting, knowing full well that, you know, by the time we went home, there probably wouldn't even be enough time to sleep and eat and shower and only to come right back again. We might as well just sleep at the school. And so, you know, that's kind of our little confession there. But yeah, for anyone who has tried to, I'm not encouraging this, please, first community, but it has been done on at least one occasion. But those were some amazing times, and I'm glad to say
Mr.
that.
Bredner.
Yeah, but I'm glad to say, yeah, Mr. B. But I'm glad to say that, you know, my high school years were absolutely littered with amazing positive stories, just like that one. So that's probably my favorite one from the 90s, knowing that you know, there are kids doing kind of like exact same thing. Hopefully you're not sleeping over at the school, but kind of doing the same kind of stuff that we were doing back in the 90s because of this whole first thing.
Do you remember the time where, because our robot in 1998 had an elevator that was a tube-based elevator using string as the propulsion source, and we needed a way to tension the string. And we ended up finding that you could using a hose clamp was basically our version of a chain turnbuckle. Was just because, again, at this point in first, you could not just use off-the-shelf things, but the hose clamps were somehow legal for some weird reason. And it was like late at night, and we were like, well, okay, we need to have. Mr. Bredner's like, okay, we need hose clamps, and like, so it's like, oh, all the stores are closed or whatever. I'm like, yo, I got this. And I think you were with me that we went out into the parking lot and started going through cars and popping their hoods and pulling out hose to find a hose clamp. And Mr. B's just like, where did you get this? I'm like, oh,
Don't ask, don't tell. And we're just like, yeah, Scarborough things, Mr. Bredner, Scarborough things. Hose clamps are readily available.
He did the very responsible thing. I was like, no, don't put that back. We'll find one from somewhere else. And then there was a car in the auto shop at the school, which actually like was used for repairs or whatever, where we could harvest a hose clamp from. So our adventure inspired a legal solution. And it's kind of like when you go through the manual, you come up with a bunch of illegal things that you're never going to do in the match because we don't do that stuff, but it inspires legal solutions. So
absolutely.
One of those things. We got some good questions in chat. Shawn, this one's from Sarah Sills. Do you have comments on how FRST helped you starting a small business like Botcamp?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we founded our business, we founded it actually while we were still in high school. And what we did was we developed one of the very first systems in the world that could show you your electricity usage online. All right. And so what was really neat is that FRST really helped us break through the fear of starting your own company and developing a product, because a lot of people say, oh, I've got this great idea. How the heck am I going to actually make this thing? Can I make this thing and execute it? And going through FRST, you kind of learn that, okay, I'm used to doing something really, really, really hard. Building a robot, incredibly difficult. I'm used to failing. I'm used to building that mechanism the first time, expecting it to fail, understanding that if I just keep reiterating it, improving it, reiterating it, that eventually once I do this enough, it is going to work. You approach problems just knowing that eventually you're gonna figure this out and get it to work. There's very little fear involved there. And I think that's the difference between, you know, when I look to hire people for Botcamp, the reason why it's great for them to have FRST in robotics experience is because I know that's exactly how they tackle a hard problem like that. I can give it to them. They're not paralyzed by it, which is, I think, what a big problem is with, I don't want to say like the rest of the world, but it's a very, very common thing when you give people very difficult problems.
Aidan, has your time in FRST kind of led you towards more of an entrepreneurial slant that you feel than like your classmates at school? Or
I would definitely say so, because like I personally I like to think about things in the present, but if I'm ever thinking towards the future, I'd say before I joined FRST, I would think starting like your own startup, that sounds terrifying. Like you have no idea what you're doing, you have nobody to ask. But just going into this, like for example, Mr. Lim, I am a volunteer at Botcamp, and if I want to speak to somebody who's started their own startup, I can talk to Mr. Lim, who's a mentor, and there's like so many other mentors and other alumni I can talk to. And in being
I feel
in
like
FRST,
half your mentors on 610 have their own companies. Like
they do. A lot of the alumni mentors,
literally.
Yeah, I'm not even exaggerating.
No, I don't think you're exaggerating
Norris, Michael Yan.
Yep.
So just like having that network of people you can talk to as well as you can learn from. I've personally, you were saying like mentors on 610, I've like gotten to learn about their experiences. I've gotten to know where they went to school, how they started their startups, like what it all sort of started from. Just knowing like, oh, is a startup gonna start out like just like two guys in a garage? And half the time it is, but like you can just see how much further it can build from there. You don't have that same fear of failure. You embrace it.
On the same topic, another question from the chat from Namira, again, one of our youth council members, is what's your best piece of advice for young entrepreneurs?
Start now when you're young, before you have kids and a mortgage to be able to do it. Because I'll be honest, like I just went through that fear of failure and things like that. There's a good chance that your first one is just not going to work out. And I'm not going to say because of technical reasons. Honestly, your technical skills will probably get you a good product, but it's all the other stuff when you start dealing in the real world with red tape and relationship building and trying to get your product out there. But start early. And even if you fail, you're going to build some incredible skills, which are going to kind of allow you to skyrocket in whatever you choose to do after that. The second piece of advice I really have for you guys is make decisions like really, really, really quickly. All right. That's the advantage of being a young entrepreneur. Don't be afraid of them. Again, it's that fear factor, but it's not on the technical side, but it's honestly, you just got to go out there and you got to put your salesman cap on really quickly. And again, if you're able to build a team from your first group of friends, assemble one where you have people from all those varieties of skills. Don't just start with technical people. And maybe I'll say that was one of my downfalls for the first company we started, and it was successful, don't get me wrong, but I think we could have been orders of magnitude more successful helpful if we had roped in one of our, chairman's people who was out, used to going out and presenting and making cold calls and building the relationships to say that, hey, everyone really needs this web-based electricity monitoring system out there. Don't get so locked into just doing the technical side.
Well, that is some fabulous advice. Thank you so much for being on the show, Shawn. Thanks for sharing about your visor design for Michael Gayron Hospital. As Shawn said, they're trying to get to up to 10,000 visors, but they're going to want more after that. So check out the information. Botcamp.org is where they can find the information in the STL files. You can also learn about the cool programs that Shawn's offering to teach entrepreneurial skills. Also, Shawn does hire a lot of FIRST alums.
100%.
He brings in high school students as volunteers like Aidan, and he hires alums. So alums, if you're interested in working in a cool place where you're going to take a lot of your robotic skills and work on cool projects and get to mentor the next generation, get in touch with Shawn. I'm sure he's looking for more candidates for the future and beyond. Thanks so much for coming on, Shawn. This was a really informative segment as always. Like talking about the past, love catching up with a friend. Say hi to young Christopher for all of us, and thank you. And we will be back with our next segment after we play another video for McMaster University.
Take care, everyone.
So a big motivator for me actually has been girls in STEM and equality. So being on my first team, I remember when I was in my grade 10 year, I was 1 out of 3 girls on a 28-member team. So that became a really big priority for me. So promoting girls through campaigns, attending girls in STEM conferences here at McMaster and in FRC Robotics. And now being first alum, I hope to go back and mentor while I'm in university.
All right, we're back for another segment. This is going to be a good one. We'd like to introduce Jaeleen Koscielski, alum and mentor of Team 772, former lead mentor of Team 5092. That was a really fun experience. I remember that. Dean's List finalist in 2014 and a FIRST Canada regular volunteer. Also a figure skating superstar at the University of Waterloo. Would not want to forget that. Hey, Jaeleen, welcome to the show.
Hi, glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. So you are the third Koscielski we have had on the show. We've had both your one of your brothers and your mom, and you're just in this family that is just so engrossed with FIRST at every level. It's kind of amazing to see. So tell us how your story came about and where it started, where it ended up, and how your family's been involved in all of this.
Yeah, so if you guys saw Ian's, the middle of the brothers, similar story to him, where our oldest brother Joel was a part of Team 772. He went to Sandwich in LaSalle and was on the team in 2005. And my dad went to Atlanta for the World Championships that year and he fell in love. He's works at Centerline, so they're a platinum sponsor for FIRST Canada now, but got us all involved. We went to the Greater Toronto Regional at the time. In 2006 as a family, and I was just 7 years old. And I remember walking into the huge Hershey Center, which is like, for me, it was huge coming from a small town. And I just remember looking at both of these fields with these cool robots and the big lights and spotlights on all these kids, and just questioning how my 15-year-old brother, that like me and Joel are 7 years apart, so we didn't play a lot when we were kids or anything till we got older, but I was like, how did they do this? Like, how did these high school students build this robot? So as I got older, I continued to go to competitions. We went every year. We went to at least one. Went all over the US. I've traveled a lot of the US when I was in grade school with the team. And I remember parents always asking, are you in the team yet? Are you in the team yet? I was like, no, I still got more years. But I joined the team in grade 9, super excited. I joined the public relations section. And then in grade 10, I was the public relations leader. And then in grades 11 and 12, I was the team coordinator of 772. And then, as you mentioned, I did win the Dean's List award in 2014, which was my grade 11 year, which was pretty amazing. You were there for that time, so that was a very exciting day for me. And yeah, so after that, I graduated, and now I've been a mentor for Team 772. For one of my co-op jobs at school, I was a mentor for Team 5092, which unfortunately the team does not exist anymore. They folded after I left. I tried really hard to get them back, but they didn't have the support there to continue. And yeah, so I continue to volunteer. I was supposed to go to like 6 weeks this year, which was going to be the most I had been able to do, being in my last term of school. So unfortunately, we were on our way to Ottawa when we got the call, and I ended up just spending the weekend with my brother, which was nice, but we didn't get to go to the event. So yeah, I guess that's my story.
That's a pretty epic one right there.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you have a very extensive like first journey. What would you say is your favorite memory or story during this?
My favorite memory, I guess would be when I did mentor 5092. I guess as like an alum of FRC. It was the coolest thing. I was at the Waterloo event. Actually, we went to Victoria Park and the Waterloo event, and our team was about 4 kids. There was like a 5th and a 6th that would show up every once in a while, but essentially it was like 4 really dedicated students and myself, and I was only 3 years older than them at the time. And we had one more co-op student that was, he had managed to skip a grade and was the same age as the grade 12 students, which is really weird, but he was their mentor as well. So the 6 of us essentially went to these competitions, and they went to Tannenbaum Chat, which is a Jewish private school. So because of their religious beliefs and the rules of the school, they weren't able to compete on the Saturdays. So we went to Victoria Park.
Kind of a big day at these events.
Yeah, like one of the busiest days. So at Victoria Park, we had we went there hoping to find a team to help us out because it was a new event. We didn't know very many teams. I didn't know very many teams that were going. And we ended up luckily getting next to 5406 Celtex. And when we got there, we asked them, like, can we borrow some team members to drive our robot on Saturday? Like, I will still be there, but I can't drive the robot. I'm a mentor. And they drove the robot all day, the first day of competition. And then when the students got there on Sunday, they were able to continue to drive and compete the whole competition, even though they weren't able to be at the competition on Saturday. And again, that happened when they went to the Waterloo event. The first event they had ever traveled with, it was a big deal to get these students to go because I don't know as much about the religion. So I had to learn a lot about that when I got there too. So the different beliefs and regulations of the school and that kind of stuff. So we ended up going to Waterloo, and we had 1114 and 772 helping us out, which for them was like the coolest thing ever because unfortunately they didn't know 5406 as well as they knew 1114 and 772. So when they found out that they were going to drive the robot and help them out, they were like jumping up and down, so excited. And they were lucky enough that those 2 teams have so much experience that when the competition was over, they were able to like communicate with them a lot. But the team 1114 and 772 both worked on their program and gave them a couple like notes to look at so that they could go back and improve the robot. They didn't make it to district champs, but they could at least learn again. And I'm not a programmer. I'm not very technically advanced at all. I've been more on the business side. So for them to be able to learn from another student, I think was so valuable. And I will never forget that experience. It was the greatest GP year I'd ever seen in my life, coming from a team that was so small. So yeah, I think that's kind of a long story, but I thought it was really impactful for each of those students and even from the more experienced teams.
Yeah, I think it's just a testament to the strength of this community where the fact that you knew that if you went to an event, there was going to be someone to help you out there, and that these teams at 1114 and 772 didn't just, go through the motions, but it was not just about, okay, well, we'll drive their robot and whatever. They had a genuine interest in making the team better. Exactly. And I think even at that event, actually, 5092 ended up playing 1114 in the elimination rounds.
They did. They were on Alliance 8 and 1114 was on Alliance 1, and they were literally driving against their own team. It was like the craziest thing to see them still drive with purpose, even like still drive like it was their robot, even though they were playing against their team. And our robot was not good at all. It broke the first match, but they tried, and those students learned so much. So it was great to see.
Yeah, it's a really special sort of thing about this program to see how all of that comes together. So I know that's kind of, we asked you about your favorite story, but is there like a proudest moment that you have in this journey that started from when you were like a little kid just showing up at events?
Yeah, so I guess I have one from when I was on a 772 and then one as a mentor. So we worked like so hard to get the chairman's award for years and years and years. And in my grade 10 year, I was working on it as the public relations leader. So I worked really hard on it with one of my best friends. And we didn't win in my grade 10 year, but in my grade 11 year, we worked even harder. We had, I think it was 17 to 19 teams in the Windsor-Essex region. And previously there had been, in my grade 9 year, there was just us. In my grade 10 year, there was 4. And then in my grade 11 year, we had almost 20. So the growth was phenomenal. And we ended up getting the Windsor-Essex Great Lakes Regional for the inaugural in 2014. So Karthik was here for this. It was the coolest day of my life. And I still tell everyone this is the best day of my life. So we did our presentation. We thought we did really well. And we started doing the awards. We're going through, and we're like, oh my gosh, we're not going to get any award. We're like so scared. So we ended up going through, and just before that, I had won the Dean's List Award. So I'd won with someone from, I'd run with Graham from 1114. And I remember like jumping up and down and crying and freaking out and like slowly making it back to the stands. And I remember, I don't know exactly what happened, but there was some sort of stall that happened so that I had the opportunity to get back to my seat. And then we had, Karthik was reading the explanation of who won chairman's. And actually one of my best friend's parents was videotaping me and her because we had done chairman's together. And all of a sudden I just jump up and down because I knew that it was us. And I'm literally shaking telling this story because it just brings back so many good memories. But we won. And I couldn't stand, I couldn't hold myself up because I knew that we put in so much work. And all the teams there, like a lot of the teams, about half were teams that we had helped start and mentor and continuously put in the effort to get them to where they were, which was at that competition. So it was a great like moment for me and my team, and see that our hard work had finally paid off. So kind of going from that to being a mentor, and Ian touched on this one as well, but in 2018, 772 was lucky enough to win the Engineering Inspiration Award at Worlds. And it was a crazy moment because they accidentally said the wrong team number and we were kind of upset. And we had gone back to the pit and we were like, oh, that's okay, we can try again next year. And then we just remember them saying, oh, we made a mistake. Congratulations, Team 772. And it's me and a couple of our the mentors, other mentors, and Ian just running back to try to get to go back to the field to get our award. But it was amazing to see that not only were they able to win Engineering Inspiration at Worlds, but that was the first award that 772 has ever won at World Championships. So to be able to win an award at that caliber was absolutely amazing.
Those are some really impressive stories. I also think it was so cool when you won Dean's List because your older brother had won Dean's List as well. Yeah. And it's just like to see two of those in the same family. And I remember his pride when you won. And, you know, he's not like the most emotional or whatever. He's not really good at showing it. But Aaron was just so proud of you. And it was just like a cool thing to see up close.
Yeah, it was so cool. We're the closest siblings, like me and him. So we often fought as children and, you know, normal sibling things, but it was cool that throughout first, and I guess this goes for me and all of my brothers and even my parents, that we can share something like this and congratulate each other. And even to hear Ian talk about each of us was very interesting. So if you want to see kind of what we all do, go back and check out his, because he did a good job of explaining it. But we're all just super involved. And like he said, we talk about it all the time. I'm sure on Easter we'll all get on like a Zoom chat or something and chat about what's going on, because we're used to seeing each other almost every weekend through March and April. So this is really weird for us.
Yeah, the Koscielski family reunions.
Yeah.
Aidan, do you have a question for Jaeleen?
I less of a question, but more of a comment. I have to say, just like, I know you talked about it a little bit previous, but I think just your story about like giving your team's robot to teams like 5406 and 1114 was like, I have not had a similar experience, but I've been on sort of a similar end of that. I know Team 610 in 2018, 2019, and this year have at our events tried to help other teams for programming, and we send out like some of our younger students to help program all the rookie teams for their auto programs. And I just think it really isn't like, it's a testament to the gracious professionalism in FIRST, because as you said, the team members on 11-14 were, they were playing it like it was their own robot, and they wanted to beat their own team in the qualification matches, in the elimination matches with your team. And I think I'm going to remember that as probably one of my favorite stories about gracious professionalism. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it was probably the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I don't know if there's very many stories that top it, but I'm sure there's some that are about the same, like just taking that gracious professionalism and really not just giving it to other teams, but really taking it and to another level, essentially. And it's just amazing.
So Jaeleen, when you were done FIRST in high school, where did you end up going, and how did FIRST impact your choice of university and program?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Waterloo. I'm still there. I'm just in my last week or two. I have 3 more exams and I'm done. So I'm
Well, you're still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I originally went into engineering. I was in nanotechnology engineering. That was the hardest thing I've ever put myself through ever. Like it was the first reality check I ever had. I tended to be like a lot of FIRST students. School and high school comes pretty easy, or not much. There's not much extra work to be able to be successful. Not everyone, but I happened to be lucky enough to be one of those kids that didn't really have to study much in high school to get the grades I needed to get to university. There's always some classes that were a little more difficult, but
I'm going to brag about you here for a second, but nanotechnology at the University of Waterloo is one of the hardest programs to get into in all of Canada. It is extremely, extremely competitive. So the fact that Jaeleen got in without putting in too much work in high school speaks to your level of competency and intellect. So that's impressive.
Yeah, so I did get into that program. I'm not in that program anymore. I finished just about 2 years. So sometimes I call myself a half engineer because I'm almost there.
What's half of a nano? Like it's
I don't know. Pretty small.
Small joke. Yeah.
Nano joke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, so I did finish my 2B term. So it was right in the middle of my 5 years. And I just found myself not excited to go study for my exams or to go to class, or I just wasn't excited about anything in school anymore. And I found myself really struggling. And I did struggle through my first year. I was always a homebody. I've lived in the same house my whole life, lived in the same town. Everything was familiar. And all of a sudden there was this big change, and I didn't know how to react to it like a lot of students do when they go to university. And I had a really, really hard time. I got through my first year, but I didn't really learn anything. So I wasn't enjoying what I was learning in my second year because I didn't understand the basics of what was taught in the first year. So I found myself really struggling on, like you said, it's a very difficult program to get into. And my brain, my whole body was telling me, you're failing, you're giving up. And I wasn't. I was just figuring out that this isn't something I want to do. And I transitioned into the science and business program, again, at the University of Waterloo, and all my credits ended up transferring over really nicely. So that's the program I'm in now. And I absolutely love it. It's a great program. It really complements FIRST, like science and business. Like how more perfect could you get to complement a FIRST student? So I actually met a couple people in my program that were alumni. They don't volunteer anymore, but they were on teams, and I just thought that was so cool that program like set up perfectly for me. So I'm in my last term. I have 3 more exams and I'm done. I have to finish an essay this afternoon, but other than that, yeah, it was a great experience. It was a co-op program as well. So I did 3 of my co-ops while in engineering, 1 in the transition, and then an 8-month one just last year in my science and business program. So I did get a lot of experience throughout all of those programs.
And for some of your co-ops, Jaeleen, you worked at a couple FIRST sponsors, didn't you?
I did. My first one, I worked at Centerline. So I got to come home and I actually worked with my dad on a lot of projects, which was really interesting. So he was overlooking some of the research projects that I was doing. My second one was at Tandem Chat, which isn't a sponsor, but that was the one where I was a first and VEX mentor, which was the coolest co-op job ever. And then I worked at Magna International for my third co-op. So that was a pretty cool experience. And I got that job from volunteering at events. I work a lot with Kim and Arti on the special invited guests, and I get to tour them around and talk to a lot of them. So I met a lot of executives from Magna and ended up reaching out to them when I transitioned to programs and was having a hard time finding co-op because a lot of people were like, why'd you switch programs? And they had a hard time understanding. So luckily I had met them, had reached out, and they said, yeah, we'll find a job for you. We want you to work for us. So it was pretty cool.
That's always a great feeling. A really interesting question we have here was we mentioned earlier that you are a competitive figure skater. You can on the varsity figure skating team at Waterloo. Are there any similarities, parallels between your competitive skating and your time with First?
I think there definitely is. It's I guess varsity is a lot different than normal figure skating. So
Sure.
A lot of people don't know this, I guess, but I've had a lot of injuries. You may have seen me on crutches at random events, but I had 3 knee surgeries. I played a lot of competitive soccer as well. So I had to transition from figure skating, which is the traditional like jumping and spinning, into ice dance, which is, if you watch it all, Tessa and Scott, that's what they do.
Who is actually a Canadian and has not seen Tessa and Scott?
So they do that. They don't jump. They still do spins, but it's a lot of different turns and like intricate maneuvers. So that's what I transitioned to. And I guess that's kind of that flowed with my programs as well in university. It was a big transition all in university at the same time. But there's definitely overlaps. In varsity, it's a team sport. So we compete for the University of Waterloo or whichever university you're a part of, and you accumulate points. So it's very similar to the district model in that each event is different points. So it's been kind of cool. Like those are pretty cool similarities. And I guess the effort you have to put in. So when I am on my team, I get up at 5 in the morning for most of my practices, and I have 2 a week. And then we have some in the afternoon. So I'm at the rink almost every day or working out every day. So I'm putting in that effort rather than into an award or into the robot. I'm just working on my body or my program. So I guess it's just like any sport, right? You're putting in the effort, you're putting in that teamwork, similar to First.
It's already challenging enough for varsity athletes in university to balance school and their sport. How did you manage to balance school, your sport, and then everything you do for First?
So ever since I was a little kid, I've been involved with a million things. Like I did Girl Guides, I did soccer, I did figure skating. Then I started doing robotics. It was like every night of the week was something, and school. So I'm very like schedule oriented. I have like I have my agenda sitting next to me right now. I have my calendar always up. So I tend to try to stay organized as much as possible with my schedule. I have a saying, if it's on my calendar, it's not going to happen, because I don't have room in my brain to remember. And as soon as I know I'm meeting with a friend, if I'm meeting, if I have a robotics event, if I, like, for example, First Canada Live, it's in my calendar so that I know it's going to happen. And whether it go off on my watch or my phone, I know that it's going to happen. So staying organized is how I do that, by like scheduling my time. And something I've been trying to focus on, especially during this isolation period, is making sure that I have time for school. I have time for like just relaxation and for myself. So waking up in the morning and making sure that my schedule is the same every day. So going, doing a workout, having a good breakfast, doing my homework, that kind of thing, making sure that my days are scheduled and in a routine. Once you get into routine, it just makes everything a lot easier. And that's what I did with varsity and with robotics and school, is making sure that every day was a routine that made it easier. And I didn't have to think about what I had to do next. I just knew.
That's some amazing advice for all the students who are watching. But I know, like, I know exactly what you mean about your calendar. Google Calendar runs my life. It tells me, it dings, and I'm like, okay, I'm headed this way. It's like, if you don't get in my calendar, you're not getting my time. It's just like, it's intense like that. So, you know, that's some great advice that you have there for our students. But has there been one mentor or maybe multiple mentors who've inspired you over your time in FIRST that you'd like to recognize right now?
Yeah, so like a lot of FIRST alumni, just students, Woody Flowers has been a huge mentor in my life. I was lucky enough to meet him and spend the whole weekend with him at the Windsor event last year. And Karthik was there as well. We were kind of his little bodyguards. It was the coolest experience of my life, just to be able to talk to him and hear him speak. And a lot of the things he said to me like really stuck with me, and they will for my whole life. Some books he suggested to read that I finally get to read now because I have more time, stuff like that. And I just thinking about him makes me want to cry now because he's such
and I'm just going to make things more emotional at this point. But what I loved about that day where it was the two of us with Woody is if anyone would ask Woody, it's like, oh, well, what are you doing next? He's like, oh, ask her. She's my boss. And he was so deferent to you, but at the same time, like he just, I don't know. He just like you could just tell that he just like wanted to chat with you. He wanted to hear what you were doing, you know, because people were always asking Woody about stories of like, Woody, tell me about this, tell me about this. And he just wanted to hear from you. And I just thought it was so just speaks to the kind of person Woody was, because he was always trying to learn and he clearly saw there was something from you that he wanted to learn. And he was so investigative, but caring at the same time. It was just, that was one of my favorites. I've done it FIRST for a long time, but like that day and a half that the two of us spent with Woody was just such a cool experience.
It was, and he's has such a unique personality, in the fact that he was able to, the coolest thing I thought was when we would go into the volunteer lounge versus speaking with executives in the special invited guests area versus students, he would essentially say similar messages to these people, but he was able to say it at a different level so that each of the people he was talking to could understand what he meant. And that was just amazing for me. It was so cool to be able to hear somebody that is so intelligent and like way smarter than me. Like, oh my gosh, just the amount of knowledge he had was amazing. And to be able to inform other people of what he was saying at different levels was amazing. So he's definitely like, I'll never forget those days. That was amazing for me. And
yeah, I think the whole concept with what we've done here on FIRST Canada Live with story time, so much of that was rooted in Woody's influence, because not only was Woody one of the most brilliant people you'll ever meet, he was also one of the wisest people you'll meet, but he was just this amazing storyteller where he could really put you in the scene of the story. You felt like you were actually there because of the way he'd absorb details. And you were absolutely right. He was such a good communicator because he didn't communicate to people. He communicated to individuals. He found a way to make you relate to what was going on, and so you would understand. And it always felt like, because I know, having gone to school for a long time, like everyone else, it doesn't feel like the lesson is directed at you. But with Woody, it always felt that even if he was telling a story to a group of 10 people, he'd find a way to directly relate to all 10 of them.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating.
Yeah, so just one thing I want to bring up here. On my computer, I have a sticky note, and he was in one of his talks or something recently that had come up, and it says Woody's teachings. There's 5 of them. So the first one is, there is a joy in hard work. Number 2, just get started and play. Number 3, everyone belongs. Number 4, design belongs everywhere. And number 5, be yourself. And I have that on my screen every day to just remind me of just his teachings and to remind myself of those things.
That is some great advice from the person who had always the best advice for us, Dr. Woody Flowers. Jaeleen, thank you for being on the show today. Really inspirational segment. I'm glad we just got to tell stories and chat about your experience, your journey, and the awesome advice that you gave to all the students and the mentors and everyone else who's been watching. So thank you for that, coming on. The third Koscielski to be on the show. We just got to work on getting the other ones on here. A segment with Aaron, I don't know. well, we'll see how that goes. Thank you. But we got another great segment coming up. We got a robot team showcase coming up with Team 4039. But before we do that, let's hear once again from McMaster University.
So I'm Adam Tosti. I'm in Eng 1 and I'm going into mechanical engineering. To me, FRC Robotics means an opportunity to solve problems with a great group of people, build some great friends, and be introduced to the engineering problem-solving experience at a young age. I think it's great that they're excited about participating in robotics and especially the STEM field as a whole, because a lot of high schools, especially mine, had such a big focus on sports in the past that I feel like technology didn't get a big say, and now that they're getting excited, it's getting a lot more ground. The best thing about being a back-end student is probably the people. The school is great, of course, but the people here are wonderful, and everyone I've met in engineering has been a totally great person. McMaster is probably one of my favorite competitions. It always has a lot of really good teams, especially in Ontario. It's a great venue, and I just overall really enjoyed it.
All right, and we're back for another segment here, First Canada Live. Aidan, are you excited for this one?
Definitely excited.
Well, I mean, I guess you kind of know this robot pretty well because you had a chance to play with them at the.
I'd say I'm definitely excited because I personally I got to play with them, and as well, when you're competing, you don't get to see as much of the robots as you might want to see as if you're in the stands. And I'm definitely intrigued to see more about my alliance partner.
Yeah, and I just want to learn from them. So introducing Team 4039, MakeShift Robotics from Hamilton, Ontario. They've been doing first since 2012. They came out with a big bang. They have won 14 blue banners, including most recently the 2020 Durham College District Event Chairman's Award. Please welcome, we've got Cam, we've got Thomas, we've got two Dean's List winners, Valentina and Miguel, and we also have their mentor from MDA Robotics, Mac Landfield. So hey, 4039, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Karthik.
Well, thank you for being here. So why don't you take it away? Why don't you introduce yourselves, each of you, and then we'll go jump into your presentation.
What are my chances at trial?
Hi, I'm Cam. I've been on the team for 3 years, and I'm co-mechanical lead, and I also do CAD.
You will always have a record.
Hi, I'm Miguel. I also do mechanical design. I'm also the driver for 2020 season.
I want you to know.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I was the co-team captain and operator on 4039. I'm in grade 12, and this is my 4th year on the team.
Hi, my name is Valentina. This is my 3rd year on FRC team. I'm currently in grade 11. I was part of our team's drive team. I was a chairman's presenter, and during our build season, I worked on mechanical projects.
And I'm Matt. This is my 6th year as a mentor for MakeShift.
Oh, it's so pretty.
So we would like to talk to you guys today about our 2020 robot Bloom.
Yeah, but instead we decided to talk about some few things that we think are more important. Yeah. Next slide.
Slide. So we prepared a slideshow for our 2020 robot Bloom, but decided after seeing multiple teams do robot showcases that we would want to try to mix things up, since after a while an intake is just an intake. So we decided
That's a great line from Team 2200. That's going to stick.
We decided after we take our experience from our week 1 district event at Durham and make a top 10 tips for teams who have yet to play Infinite Recharge for the off season. Next slide, please.
So a little bit about 4039. We're an FRC team from St. Mary's Catholic Secondary School in Hamilton. We actually started back in 2007 when one of our mentors had his kids on an FLL team, which was the first FLL team in our school board. And when they graduated and saw that their high school didn't have a robotics team or any STEM-related extracurriculars, they advocated to start 4039 in 2012. So this is our 9th year competing in FRC. We have 27 students ranging from grade 8 to grade 12. We work out of a small workshop in our portable behind our school, and our motto is shifting the perception of science and technology. So during competitions, as you can see in the picture, you might see us as like the rainbow team. We start off our competitions usually gray, black, white, kind of symbolizing the mentality with some students that sciences or STEM is really boring, not that fun, kind of nerdy. Throughout the competition, we had a pop of color here and there until we're completely rainbow. And that's to showcase us basically taking students and showing them different things about STEM that is actually really interesting, or kind of shifting the perception, like we say, until they're completely colorful. Next slide, please. So for our tips, number 10 would be human player coordination. During a match, there's a lot going on behind the alliance wall, especially for human players. So it's really important to have human player coordination, especially to avoid things like your H9 penalties, which can become hard to avoid when there's stressful situations like elimination rounds or later matches when other teams are scoring power cells a lot more consistently and a lot faster. And of course, you want to get rid of as many power cells as you have to, but you want to make sure that you're doing it efficiently. So some tips would be to talk to other human players on your alliance before a match, come up with a game plan, strategize, maybe assign different roles to different human players, someone keeping count of how many power cells are behind the alliance wall, and someone making sure that robots are being fed at the loading station. Another tip would be to understand how your partners want to be fed. Of course, you're going to know how to feed your robot best, and their human player is going to know how to feed their robot best, but we're not always going to be able to feed our own robots. So it's really important to know how to feed different teams' robots because you're not that accustomed to it. And lastly is one human player on watch at all times. So I know during one of our competitions, I was really stressed out behind the wall trying to get rid of all the power cells because I was getting a little overwhelmed with how much were coming in that I completely didn't see an entire robot standing right in front of the loading station waiting to be loaded with power cells. And it cost us a couple seconds, but at the end of a match, those couple seconds can be really vital. Next slide, please. So on the right side, you're going to see our robot at the Blue Alliance loading station, kind of just sitting there for a couple seconds, not being loaded until it finally is. And once again, those couple seconds are really vital. So always make sure that you're paying attention to the robot being loaded. Next slide.
Yeah, so another thing that happens quite often is congestion in the midfield. So especially when you got robots that have the same lines and so they collide and interfere with others. For example, two robots trying to go to the trench even though they shoot from different positions. So some tips that we have to avoid that is during pre-match strategy, actually have a plan on which lanes you're going to use. For example, you got the trench lane, the rendezvous lane, the defense lane. So you also got a plan for communication between drive coaches and drivers. So actually, a lot that happened during the competition is that we actually ended up colliding with a few of our alliance partners quite often. So in the next slide, please. In this slide, we actually see how we collided with one of our alliance partners because we didn't have a very well thought out plan. Yeah, all right, next slide.
So our eighth tip is we found climbing is easier and harder than it looks this year. Climbing this year is worth a lot of points, and teams that can do it well and consistently often seed high. We noticed that balancing 2 to 3 robots this year was a lot easier than we had anticipated. But it could have also be a lot harder because there's a lot of variation between teams climbing, and coordination between different drive teams is extremely important when trying to balance the robot. Some tips we had was having a plan. That was super important for success when balancing. Knowing where you're going to climb before a match is extremely important, so you don't get to the rendezvous and have to figure out who's climbing where when there's only 30 seconds to climb. Another important thing was to go early. as there might be unforeseen complications when you get to the rendezvous. And it was really good to have time to figure it out. And especially having a backup plan was super important because we had some reliability issues ourselves at Durham where we couldn't climb. It's good to have a backup plan so you can still get that balance and ranking point, even if one of the robots on the team, the alliance, can't climb. Next slide, please. So this is an example of how simple it was for us to climb. We're a much lighter robot, 6'10", a much heavier robot, and we still get up climb from just eyeballing the distance. Next slide.
So another thing that happens, especially with this field this year, is that every alliance station is different, especially with the angle at which the other stations are placed. So the driver usually will have difficulty like adapting between driver stations. So one thing that your driver can do is move around in the driver station to get the best views in case you can't see something. But ultimately, the best thing is to get practice, and that's why we encourage you to come and practice with us at Hamilton in the shared practice field. Okay, next slide, please.
Number 6 is 5 points for everyone. So this is talking about the autonomous portion of a match. When you're being selected with alliances, you're not always going to have teams that all have an autonomous, even if it is a move forward autonomous. And this deprives every alliance of 5 points per match. So something and some tips to counter this would be to pit scout and identify different teams on your alliance who might not have this autonomous and work alongside their programmers and your programmers to code, even if it's a simple autonomous, maybe driving X number of seconds forward, anything, nothing too fancy that might help this alliance to move forward during a match. I remember we helped Team 7800 during one of our matches to code a straightforward autonomous, and it took less than 15 minutes, and they were really appreciative of it. You might not know, but that autonomous might serve a team, not just that one competition or that one match. It might serve them throughout the entire season.
And beyond that, it could serve them because you're teaching them, and suddenly they've learned how to do an autonomous mode for the first time ever. And that's such a powerful thing to give to a team. It's a gift that's going to last like forever. And so there's a lot of teams in Ontario who are doing this, and it's such a great effort because it's not just about, I'm going to get 5 points for this match. I'm giving a team this life-changing experience. I hate to sound dramatic, but it really can be, so it's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's really not just like a selfish reason of just being like that one match. Like it really could be something that will carry out throughout. Last tip is if there isn't enough time during a match to set up a new autonomous, even changing your autonomous to help push a team off the line. Like in this video, we push off 2 teams off the line at our practice field, can also help during a match. Next slide, please.
Number 5, Rocky Rendezvous. So there are a lot of things that go into your robot playing during a match. One of those things is your electronics. It's what makes your robot run. So you always have to make sure that all your connections are properly done. And to make sure that they're ready, we had a sensor connected to our robo-reel come loose during a match. That meant that we couldn't index the balls from our elevator for the rest of the match. So it's those like little things that you can improve on and make sure that they are done properly that can really help you and make sure that things don't happen like this. So some tips are to ensure your connections are secure and make sure your battery is secure as well. We have 3D printed clips in our RoboRio to help us, and performing a pre-match and post-match system checks are really important as well.
I know definitely having your battery not come loose in a match is very important because at Durham, 610 had our first battery come unplugged in a number of years. So.
Yeah, also, Karthik, a question for you. What do you think of hot gluing connections?
Hot glue everything. I know some people. some people are, some very prominent people in the FRC community are like, oh no, it only weaken it. No, Hawk 2, it stays in there. I know 2056 uses this type of gray putty on a lot of their connections, and that's a really interesting approach. But one of the things on 1114 for years would be is elimination rounds comes, and we our third robot, we head over with the glue gun, and we take every connection through. It's solid and it's locked in there. And yeah, it's a pain when you need to change things around, but when it comes to elimination rounds, you can deal with that pain after you've been eliminated or after you have your blue banner.
Next slide. Okay, number 4, 1,000 things. So as I said before, there are a lot of things that are included in your robot running during a match. So there are at least 1,000 things that have to go right during every match. In one match at Durham, we connected the auto before the robot connected to the FMS, and it did not run. So we now have a pre-match checklist in the pits, which we all go over and make sure everything is going smoothly. We get into another tip is to get into a proper routine, even at the practice field, to know what is going on, to have everybody do checks and all that. Also have a checklist for your drive team when they get onto the field to double check things. And also having a teammate double check your work. So an example for that is that we have to reset our climber, set the 2 arms separately. So one person does one arm, the other person does another. And then after they're both done, they switch to check if each other's work was done properly and make sure that nothing goes wrong during that match. Next slide.
So our third tip is power cell variation. We found that power cells behave very differently when new versus used. New power cells would behave differently in all systems, not just the shooter. Due to their freshness, they were a lot more sticky and grippy, which could cause more jams inside the robot. So to work this out, essentially we would cycle in new power cells while we were practicing, and we practiced with new and used power cells. So we knew our robot behaved well with both kinds of power cells. This would also help us adjust our gameplay during matches for different kinds of power cells. Worn power cells have less grip than fresh ones, so have less, they won't shoot as far. So it helped us adapt our gameplay to that too. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so where are the balls? So you'll see like during matches, like drivers confused looking around for balls and they won't know where to pick them up from. And you see them from the stands and you're like, why aren't they picking the bunch of balls that are over there? They're picking single ones instead. So during match planning, just consider where the power cells are at. Usually picking up clusters of balls is more efficient than pick that. So once again, practice optimizing your route to random clusters instead of cherry picking. And also just come practice to the practice field once again. So next slide, please.
Yeah, and on the topic of where the balls are, and I think one thing that's also important is you don't always have to shoot 5 balls. Sometimes if there's 3 balls right around and there's no other ones, just grab those 3, fire, and then go get another load. I think there was a lot of teams that were spending a lot of time trying to get that 5th ball into their robot, and that was actually hurting their cycle time. Sorry, I interrupted. Please tell us about this video.
Oh yeah, well, on the video it's just how like me just picking up random balls, and when you see there's like some massive cluster there at the left. Yeah, so that's something that you just could improve by having some practice.
Another tip I'll give is those random clusters. That cluster is not so random. It's right by the loading zone. So right now it seems safe to go get those, but you also have to be very careful about going and getting those balls nearby the loading station, because if you clip that red tape, that blue tape right there, and a blue robot hits you, then you're in the penalty territory. So you have to be strategic about that. And if you're an alliance that's looking a way to defend a really good front scorer, it's to keep one robot nearby your loading station, just to keep them away from that multitude of balls that'll be there.
Yeah, that's a good tip too. Next slide, please.
Okay, so our next tip is that defending climbs is legal. This threw us off in one of our matches. But until you're entirely within the rendezvous zone, your opponent robot doesn't draw that tech foul. So in one match, we drew a tech foul from the robot that died in our rendezvous zone, but it stopped us and our partner from climbing, which is up to 65 points in exchange for 15. So that was something that was very surprising to us, and we thought other teams should really be aware of. So you can see that on the next slide.
Were you not aware of that as a head referee, Matt?
I was aware of it, but there are things like that that catch you by surprise if you haven't practiced it, right?
Right, and the magnitude of that rule, the impact of that rule, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So we knew it was a rule, we knew it was something that could happen, but we didn't really practice how to deal with it, right? So you can see here, we didn't get fully in the rendezvous zone. We only got one tech foul from that whole interaction with both robots, but it kept both of us from climbing. So that's a 40-point swing.
Can I ask you a reffing question, Matt?
Sure.
Could that be ruled as intentionally trying to draw a penalty or an egregious strategy that could lead to a yellow card if I just decide to park my robot in your hanging zone?
Yeah, so if you're trying to do this in defense, you have to be very careful, not that it doesn't look like you're trying to take the fouls strategically.
This
right?
robot clearly is dead. Like if they're, but like, yeah, for anyone out there who's thinking, oh, this would be a great strategy, I'm just going to park in 4039 and 4976 hanging zone, just keep them from hanging there, to be aware that there could be larger repercussions.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next slide.
Bonus tip.
Yeah, bonus tip. So you'll always be safe in the triangle. So what we did to try to take advantage of this is we actually extended our frame perimeter, well, not our frame perimeter, but our robot perimeter by 12 inches by having this flopping out arms at the back of a robot. So what this does is it extends their perimeter so that defenders also have to deal with those extra 12 inches of robot perimeter that we have on our back. Only warning is that make sure that it's below the top of the bumper so that you don't get called by a G25, which is contact inside the perimeter. And also that when it breaks, it doesn't go past 12 inches. So I don't know, Karthik, if you remember Waterloo 2014. So,
yeah, that was, you know, an event.
All right. Yeah, next slide, please.
But so you have the specific flop down arms, but I guess teams could always use their intake to get that range. If you have an over the bumper intake that extends, obviously, but that intake, just dropping your intake down when you're shooting would be a nice way to get that extra range.
Yeah.
What's next for MakeShift? So during this whole pandemic, we are still having Zoom meetings to stay connected to one another and even talk to our mentors and see what they can help us with. Sewing masks for healthcare workers and other people, that's something that I'm personally doing. Talking to one of our mentors on the team who works at a hospital. 3D printing face shields. A lot of the people on our team have a 3D printer, so they are all doing this and trying to get them to our mentor who works at St. Joseph, and she brings them to a hospital to get them sterilized. Also making a separating screen for hand therapists. People on our team have been working on that for a little while. There's also lend a hand. Val?
Did we lose Val? Cam or Thomas? Oh, there's Val.
Never mind. Lend a Hand is a part of Build a Hand's Enable Build a Hand program, where they have different models of different 3D printable hands that teams or students individually can make and manufacture. And then they can also receive certification to match with someone internationally and develop a matched and specific hand for that one person.
Also during this, we are doing CAD boot camps, hopefully to be able to do them from home on our own laptops. as well as doing off-season things, hoping to get our Doppler X drive base ready for next build season as well. Hosting qualifiers, FLL, FTC, and FLL Junior, and of course co-hosting our Stanley Cup Championship, and hopefully running an FTC team within our own team next year. We hope teams can find at least one of these tips helpful. We really hope that every team gets a chance to play this game. It is really a great game. We had a great time playing at Durham, and we really hope to be able to play it again. Watch out for Stanley Cup announcements later this summer. Thanks for having us on today.
Oh, thank you for being on. This presentation was great. I love that MakeShift did things with their own sort of spin. I'd really love it if you guys if the team could maybe post a link into the Twitch chat where people can get access to these slides, because I think that would be a really useful resource for teams if and when we get to play this game again. And obviously this is going to be archived on YouTube and on Twitch so people can watch the whole thing all over again. Aidan, from watching all of that, do you have any questions about their 10 plus the bonus tip?
Pardon?
Do you have any questions about the tips that MakeShift had for playing Infinite Recharge?
I wouldn't say I have many questions. I have to say this is a lot more stuff that I didn't get to necessarily see while driving. But for example, I was always wondering, like, when you guys went to shoot, how come you guys were able to back up but be protected? And I didn't even know about the little arm. So I think, like, just learning all this little stuff, and as well as the tips, as somebody who got to play the game, I'd say a lot of these are very valuable. As somebody, like, as you're saying, make sure you have extra time to climb, like, being your alliance partner and knowing that, like all of us on the alliance had our mishaps of climbs, just knowing that you need to, like, give yourself extra time was definitely, like, one of the most helpful tips, I think.
One thing that I've taken away from this, and a lot of teams do this already, but I think it's a great piece of advice for all teams, is that after you play an event, make a list like this. Make your own list. And if you want to share it with other people, that's amazing. We would love that. But just keep it internally, because you go to an event and you learn all this stuff, but you have a team of, like 40 students and 10 mentors. It's 50 different people who've all learned things. But you got to get that all communicated. And so having this list documented on, oh, this is something we should remember, this is something we should remember, is really going to be helpful to lead you to the next level. We always talk about how teams get better from event to event, and some of it is this learning process, but you really have to make that learning process crystal clear, because the driver may not have noticed some of the things that, because she might not be able to see the whole field. So she might not have noticed the things with the ball pathing and all that sort of stuff. So it's all about making these own tips for yourself. And then if you want to share it with everyone like MakeShift did, that's even better to share the learning. But this was just a really cool presentation there. Sorry, Matt?
We have a spreadsheet that we keep for our practice matches while we're practicing between events. And we track everything that we do during those matches, high goal, low goal, where we pick up balls, all that. We also go through after events and do the same thing for our matches and the events. So we have stats on where we're best shooting from, where we're best picking up balls at, and that sort of thing. And we can see the improvement between events. I think we tracked like 60 or 70 matches so far in the season already, just at the practice field. So that was very helpful, exactly like you were saying.
And I think one thing I want to say, we thank all our guests here, but this presentation was incredible, because I think a lot of the times, I'll be completely blunt, we have teams on here and they show one side of their team, which is their successes. And that's what, we want to talk about our successes. It's more exciting. But you were willing to talk about times where things didn't go right or when you made mistakes for the benefit of the entire community. And I just love that. And that's just what makes MakeShift so special. And I'll be completely honest here, there's a lot of teams that just wouldn't have the courage to do that, because they're always, they want to present a certain image of their team. And let's be real. We all fail. We all make mistakes. Even teams who are winning events and going undefeated make mistakes at those events. And so it's just so great that you were able, number one, that you're able to learn from your own mistakes. That's how you improve yourselves, but you're willing to do this for the community. This was fabulous. So thank you so much for MakeShift. Thank you for being here. Thanks for this awesome presentation. Congratulations on your Chairman's Award. Congratulations on your Dean's List, Val, and Miguel last year. Congratulations to all of that. And we hope to see great things from MakeShift in the future. Thank you. Thank you for being on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Karthik.
Thank you so much.
All right, Aidan, now it's time to wrap things up here. This was another really, really fun show. I really love it. I keep saying this, but on First Canada Live, we just touch on so many different things. What was your favorite part of today's show?
I have to say, I think I definitely have a lot of highlights, but I think still my favorite story would be from Jaeleen about like the gracious professionalism first, because definitely it's like whenever I'm watching back the episodes or when I co-hosted with you last time, it seems to be one of your favorite parts about First is the gracious professionalism amongst teams, and I think that's just really what stuck with me about today.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely Param and Arti talking about what we can do for newcomers to the country to help them feel more welcome. And we have this program and it's so great. And then we all understand why we love First, but we have this opportunity to really impact some people who could use that impact and need that impact right now. So I think it's just on all of us, on all of our teams, to make sure our teams are as well, not just being welcoming and accepting, but to go out into your school, into your community and reach out to people and try and bring them into your team. It's good for them, but also diversity makes teams stronger. The more diversity you have, the better you will be at solving problems, because there's different approaches, different attitudes to problem solving. And that's what you need to solve a big problem, like building an FRC robot. So reach out, bring people in, be welcoming, and do cool stuff. Tomorrow is our last First Canada Live episode in this time slot from noon to 2. But we're going to be having an announcement about what's going on with the future of the show. And there's some really exciting shows coming up in the future. We can't talk about them just yet, but it's going to be great. But tune in tomorrow. We have story time with First alum, First Canada volunteer coordinator and event manager, Caitlin Walsh, mentor for teams 1334 and 1374. We've got a program showcase. We're bringing on the big boy. Johnny Hobbins is going to be here to talk about the first robotics competition and all that goodness. I can't wait to hear what John has to say. He's got a lot of great stories himself. A team showcase with Team 1285, the Big Bang. And we also have our final story time segment. And this is going to be, it's me. I'm going to be interviewed by Namira, Emily, and Mahak from the Youth Council. So I'm excited to see what questions they have for me. I have no idea what they're going to ask, but it should be a lot of fun. It's going to be great. Everyone remember, stay safe, wash your hands, take care of yourselves, practice proper social distancing. Aidan, we will talk soon, and everyone, see you tomorrow.
Let's go.